Welcome to the Baruch Performing Arts Center. I'm Stacy Jackson. I'm the New York Program Director for the Screen Actors Guild Foundation. All right, let's get down to business. I want to tell you a little bit about tonight's moderator, Nathan Bennett, or Nate Bennett. Nate is a writer and comedian living in New York City, and he has produced for online series such as High Five, My Damn Channel Live, I love saying My Damn Channel, and Life, A Gamer's Guide. He is an associate producer at My Damn Channel and an independent content creator known on YouTube as OK Nate. Let's welcome Nathan and the panelists to the stage.
Thank you. That was an extremely nice introduction that I wrote. I'm kidding. If any of you guys would like to introduce yourselves, we'll just go down the line here, starting with Susan.
I'm Susan Miller, and since this is a new media event, I'll just talk about that. I'm one of the exec producers and writers of the drama web series Anyone But Me, which is about young people, gay, straight, multi-ethnic in New York. And we completed 3 seasons with a whopping 36 million views worldwide. And also I'm the creator of another web series, a branded web series called Bestsellers. And I'm excited to be on this erstwhile panel.
Hi, I'm Josh Cohen. I'm one of the founders of TubeFilter, which you can find at tubefilter.com. Basically, we're an online publication dedicated to covering the online video and new media industry. So the same way that The Hollywood Reporter or Variety covers the traditional film and television space, we cover new media, online video, and web series, everything from YouTube videos that you may have missed to the hundreds of millions of dollars of funding going into the original content space online and kind of everything in between. And then we also produce an award show called the Streamy Awards with Dick Clark Productions that honors excellence in online video.
Hey, my name's David-Michel Davies. You can call me DMD. It's probably easier than the 3 names. I'm the president of the Webby Awards. If you haven't heard of the Webbies, we honor outstanding achievement on the internet. We look at websites, online video, social, mobile, and interactive advertising. We got about 11,000 entries from 60 countries over this past year. We have 1,000 judges in 30 different countries who go through all of the work. And then each year we have a big show here in New York, which just wrapped at the end of May. It was here at 55 Wall Street, Cipriani. It was hosted by Patton Oswalt. It was really great. We honored Jerry Seinfeld for comedians in cars getting coffee, and the inventor of the GIF, if you have any idea what a GIF or a GIF is, and shows like Burning Love, and also a lot of great websites and social projects as well. So, David-Michel Davies.
My name is Mike O'Gorman. I've been working in web content since about 2005 in various aspects. I'm a writer and performer, actor here in New York. I've been on things such as like Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, and we have a show coming out tomorrow called World's Dumbest on True TV. I'm here basically because I'm one of the creators of a web series called Tiny Apartment, which is currently in development at Comedy Central for pilot purposes.
Hi, I'm Scott Brook. I'm the executive producer at Wired. Recently, we've launched a new initiative through Conde Naste Entertainment, which is making a huge push into taking its top-tier properties and developing web content, television, and ultimately, hopefully, theatrical. And it's an exciting time. We're finding a new way to reach existing audiences and expand the reach to people who may not have explored the properties before. And it's just it's an interesting, fun time with a lot of experimentation.
Great. I want to get into the start by saying how you guys got into web video to begin with. Scott, you started in traditional media, is that correct?
Yeah, and actually before that I was an attorney, but those were dark days. So we'll gloss over that. But yeah, I started out at Nickelodeon, and it actually is related to law. I was making, was not a very happy lawyer. In fact, I'm not sure there are happy lawyers. But at the time I decided to go pursue television, and it required a dramatic reduction in salary, but a faith that you can do something that you love and it'll turn into something that's not only a worthwhile passion, but also a productive lifestyle. And at the time, Nickelodeon was going through its, its glory days. This was when SpongeBob, The Fairly Odd Parents were just hitting all the right notes and, producing a ton of revenue. And, but it was also an interesting time. This was around 2002 when Final Cut Pro had just come out with Final Cut Pro 3. And I think that was a turning point for a lot of stuff we're seeing today. It was the first time you could move away from Avid, which was a very expensive piece of infrastructure, not only from the storage, but just to every piece of the support. And now you had the ability to edit on a laptop, and back then it wasn't that powerful. And very smart people were finding ways of kind of hacking it into the, to the systems and being able to ingest media. So it represented a big shift in the power you had as a creator. So, if you had an idea in your head, you no longer had to sit in the back of a room waiting for an editor to translate that into video, which may or may not represent what you really were thinking. But now you had the control of it. And around the same time, tools became much more accessible, like After Effects. So you really had the ability to become a one-man, one-woman production team. And I think the way it's evolved over time is this concept of a producer, and editor is now a producer, editor, shooter, producer, editor, storyteller, producer, editor, storyteller, writer, initiator of concepts. And I think where we're at today is like the most recent version of this is you also have to be your own best PR. You have to be able to use tools, analytical tools, which do not be afraid of numbers and math. They are truly your best friend, and there's easy ways to get into it, but if you can go in and you can dissect where your content is coming from, you then have the ability to go out and find your audiences. And you can use traditional media, you can use new media, and all these things together really make you a one-person wrecking team. And you can take that and use it not only for traditional media, but more importantly, you can use it to crack into the new media, because I think all the tools that worked in the old school, now with the new tools available, work in the new school. You have to define who your audience is, you have to have a message that has an audience, and then you have to go out there and engage and convince people that with their busy schedules, they need to take a look at what you have.
Great. Mike, you started with Tiny Apartment and then now work in television, is that correct?
Well, I started in, I actually started in web in 2005. When it was just kind of bubbling up. So I've been doing that since then, and gradually sort of like worked my way into commercials and stuff from people who had seen me in things and knew what I had written. But this was the first serious foray into television, and it's been going on for about 2 years, to be honest. We had about 17 episodes of our web series, which we just shot in our tiny apartment. My wife and I lived in the East Village, so if any of you live there, you know. Yeah, it was just the three of us and a camera and a director, and it was sort of it was a lot like being an actor. It's a lot about who you know. The content was good, but it also became a lot about, like Scott was saying, networking and being able to publicize it ourselves. And then get it out to these people who were sort of bigger. And that the success of Tiny Apartment came from not necessarily having like 1 million views on each episode, but the right people seeing it. And I think with a lot of the new media stuff, it's easier to get those eyes on your material.
Great. Susan, how did you first get into creating web content?
Well, I did not even know what a web series was. I started out, I'm a playwright, and I also wrote for, television and film, The L Word and 30-something and Trials of Rosie O'Neill. And my plays were done at the Public, the New York Shakespeare Festival and Second Stage. And it was a moment, it was just the right moment. And I got a call from Tina Cecil Ward. I didn't know her, she was a young filmmaker. And anyway, we got together. And I just got excited about the idea of no messenger, middleman, collaboration with a lot of different opinions. Being in this business, whether it's theater or film or television, you wait so long for a response. A yes, a no, a something, even yes, I've read it, I haven't read it. And so I loved the idea of putting something on and doing it ourselves. Now, what it also threw me into was kind of what you mentioned about it's a full-time, it became a full-time job. One that I was not experienced with because I had gone the traditional route, and this certainly wasn't. I mean, and it was fun. It was, it took, and you had to, I mean, I had to learn to just reach out to people, contact everybody that I knew, you know, scour the web to see, okay, who might be the audience for this? Who are the online journalists? In our situation, two of the main characters they're two young teenage girls who are in love with each other, so that was definitely an audience that we tapped into, and it made a big difference. And we launched in 2008 during the Writers Guild strike with Strike TV, which was putting together some of this for writers who were on strike. This was not covered by the Guild. And we got for our launch that day, and this is an important thing about views. We got 500 views, which we thought was amazing. We didn't even know 500 people. How did that happen? What we came to also learn is that it isn't the views, especially with drama and indie drama, which ours is, original work, it's the engagement of the viewers. It's the loyalty, it's the passion, it's getting people who are going to come back, who are going to tell other people, who are going to stick with you and help you grow. But that is how it began for me, and for the last 5 years, really what I've been doing and loving.
Susan, you mentioned not having to really answer to somebody in this medium. Josh, you've been covering this for a long time. How do you think online video is attacking the old guard about how storytelling can be done?
I think in a few different ways. I mean, if you have a drama or a sitcom or whatever type of genre on television, there's a algorithm almost about what you're supposed to do when, and at what commercial break you're supposed to do what, and at what scene you're supposed to do that. I think with online video, I mean, obviously there aren't a lot of rules, and you can do whatever you want. Now, you can do whatever you want, that doesn't necessarily mean people are gonna watch it. I think there have been, since YouTube just turned 8, in the past 8 years, there have been some different, not rules, but I'd say some guidelines that have evolved, where if you are interested in getting views, there are some types of steps you need to take in order to get them. Whether that's start off with introducing characters possibly more quickly than you would have if you were on the traditional medium. I mean, it's just the fact that there are literally hundreds of different places for the viewer to click right alongside your video means that you have to approach, I think, engaging them in a totally different way.
David, since this medium does have so few barriers of entry, how do you think that changes the landscape of like the quality of the content and just storytelling?
I mean, I think, you know, if you go online, clearly there's a lot more bad content. I think, you know, there's a lot of very bad content, which I think is okay. And I say that with a little bit of a grain of salt, in that, you know, bad content to somebody is good content to others. And I think I see a lot of content out there that is clearly very popular if you look at the views, and when I watch it, I don't find it interesting. And I think that's sort of the nature of the world, and I think that's fine. But in terms of barrier to entry, I think some of the really cool things about barrier to entry is, yes, of course, the old sort of the formula now of, oh, well, you don't have to convince a TV station and the economics of television, and everybody understands that, and that's true and exciting. But there's some other things too. You can make a product or a pilot or something small or 2 minutes of something easily as well. And I think that doesn't get talked about as much. And that so much of, we've been talking a little bit about the metrics of getting views and stuff, but so much of succeeding is convincing other people that what you're doing is cool and has a vision and is going to be great. convincing other actors, other writers, whoever it is, that they should participate, making something and then convincing more people that they should watch it. The ability to, edit something really quickly, make something with the phone even, make something with a very inexpensive camera, all those things. At every step of the process makes the process easier. It's not just the part where, you got it on the internet and millions of people are watching it. It really helps all the way up to that. And I think that it even helps for people who eventually take things to television and film, that they can make things, smaller things, pilots, demos, whatever you want to call them, much more simply and cheaply than they ever could.
We have a question from the audience. It was, what are the most effective ways of spreading the word /PR/ getting a web video seen by as many viewers when you upload the first episode, other than blasting Facebook and Twitter? This person's thinking YouTube or Vimeo for a comedy sketch. Susan? Do you?
Well, I'm not the one to answer about comedy sketch, but and I will say that things have changed since we. I think you have to do work ahead of time. I really do. First of all, you have to, as I said, sort of reach out to people, figure out what you have or what you want to make that is going to be original and unique, because you're going to have to find a way to stand out, however you decide to do that. My thought first is make a good show, but how do you get people to know that it's even on? I think, again, if you can make sure that people are going to give it some buzz ahead of time, if you can get even a teaser, a trailer, maybe get your actors on some kind of media show, or convince somebody to do an article about you because you have a particularly interesting or important angle, or something you're writing about that you find an outlet for, they're going to want to write about that. And then, because I had this same question, I thought, well, when we do this, what do we do with it? YouTube is or was and is essential. Even if you're not putting on a 1 minute funny, quick thing. It reaches a lot of people. We also were and are partners with Hulu and Blip. And in the beginning, I do think as many distribution sites as possible. And then you start to filter and decide, maybe what is best for you. But in the beginning, that's what you need. You need people behind you. You need people who are going to help. And you also go to things like this. Actually, Tina and I were on a panel at the New School, and people from Blip were on that panel. And we just pulled them aside afterwards to talk to them. And that's how we got onto Blip.
I think just when conceiving about your show too, you should think about before even production begins or your idea for the show begins, when you're actually at that conceptual stage, to think about the innate audience for this thing. And if it's just that it's going to be funny, there probably needs to be a more niche audience than that. So you have to think about different places online that are going to watch this programming because it's what they're interested in. Like there's a show, Easy to Assemble, regardless of the star appeal with some of the actors there involved, it's involved, it was sponsored by IKEA, and it took place in an IKEA, so one of the marketers for there was very savvy and reached out to all the IKEA blogs, and there are a lot of them, about this show premiering and that it's upcoming and that they should look out for it and that maybe they want to run a contest or do something else with this. But just making sure that those types of people are aware that are going to be a good fit for your audience, I think is super crucial, especially when you're just conceiving of your series.
Mike, when you said that it wasn't about views for Tiny Apartment, it was about the right people seeing your content. Could you elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, we started releasing the episodes and had some mild success, and we're getting good comments and good feedback. And one of the writers from Late Night with Jimmy Fallon found it and he started tweeting it, and then we got a couple of writers from Conan to start tweeting it. I think it came through a friend that was working close with them, but it didn't, you know, it wasn't like one had to do with the other, and then Comedy Central got a hold of it, so it kind of snowballed. And again, like if you look at them, I don't know that any of them have more than like maybe 60,000 views or something, and that one was because Will Forte was in it. Yeah, I think a lot of it is about getting it into the right, getting it to be seen by the right people, and I think a lot of those people, when we talk about reaching out to like online blogs or something like that, I think you can do that same thing, you know, in a conservative way to some of these people that write and have access to you know, bigger media and a place where you know, if a writer from Jimmy Fallon tweets something, you know, thousands of people are going to look at it and probably click on it. And I think a lot of those people are nicer than you think and more receptive than you may think. And I wouldn't have any problem sort of reaching out to them in a way if you can figure out how to do it through Twitter or, you know, tag them in something.
Just add one thing here. I think that's really important about not being afraid to reach out, although I find actors are much more in tune with that than writers, let's say. And you're always having to find work for yourself, and I've learned a lot from actors. But in the case of Anyone But Me, for example, there was, it just happened this timing. There was a void. The L word had ended. And although our show is about heterosexuals and black and white and as well, there was a definite need. And I knew people. Kate Clinton, who was a major lesbian comic, for example, had big audiences, and she put something on her website, and then I heard about this online journal after Ellen. They were very excited to hear that there was a show like this, and so that's how we got a lot of our publicity. So anything that you're working on has to have something in it that, and it can be the most specific or even obscure thing. Find those people and, you know, mine that.
Scott, as far as this goes when it comes to like Wired and online content and reporting, how has the response from your audiences affected your work, or how does it continue to influence the work that you guys put out?
Well, I'll answer that going backwards a little bit, because I've only been the executive producer at Wired for all of about, I don't know, like 6 weeks.
Okay.
So it's a new position, but the principles I've already applied in this job, and you know, we broke some news with the exclusive on the Xbox One. We traveled up to Redmond, literally in the dead of night, under very tight security, to say the least. And you know, we shot this thing on the fly, had it edited within 3 days. That kind of content, you really don't have to worry about pickup because it's so exclusive and it's so prominent. And the keywords, when everyone searches for Xbox One the day of release and you're the first ones out the door, you don't have to really worry about getting the word out there. But looking backwards, before I took this position, I was at The Daily. And The Daily, which many of you may or may not have heard of because it's not around anymore. But it was Rupert Murdoch's vision of what a next generation paper should be. And you know, I think at the end of the day, it suffered by its business model, which was you could put content behind big walls and people would come to pay and stay for it. And that proved not to be the case. But even before that was recognized, we kind of took it on our own to start releasing content on YouTube. And there was some resistance to it at first, but what it proved is that if you get your content seen by a lot of people, just even using old advertising models, if you get 1% of the people that look at your thing to take an action, that's a success. And with large numbers, that really proves itself, but it works even for smaller numbers. Because every time you attract someone to become a follower or to engage with your content or see value in it, you've added to your sphere. And over time, that becomes an extremely valuable commodity because you can change jobs, but your Twitter handle won't change, your YouTube channel won't change. And people will put trust in you. And I think that this is a really fundamental thing. And if I can give some really serious tips about how you can make these things work for you, is the first thing to do is identify, do you have a story? And I mean, you could be on stage performing a play. You could be hanging out in front of 2 people at your home, having a drink and telling a story about the greatest thing that happened to you last week. But the principles all apply. It's like, are you telling something in an engaging way with a beginning and middle of an end and a point and something that holds people's interest? And if you can say, yes, I am, then you're well on your way to producing something that someone out there, and hopefully many more than just a few people, are going to like. So step 1 is just tell a story, and don't try to emulate anyone else. Just try to figure out what it is about this thing that moves you in a way that will tell something to have someone else pay attention to it. So if you've reached that first hurdle, you're well on your way. Well, the next step is, okay, I've created this thing, but unless you find a way to get it in front of people's faces, you've just done an art project or a personal project. And I think the first thing you do is to break out of your shell a bit. If you're a little bit introverted or you're insecure, you don't have a lot of confidence in talking to other people, you have to identify a community. And you most definitely belong to one community, if not many out there. And you probably identified the blogs and the websites you already go to. And those blogs and websites have, it's a hub and spoke. They have ones that are similar to them. And so you start getting engaged in a community. Like, I'll give you a concrete example. A deep passion of mine has always been visual effects. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, man, Sinbad and the Seven Seas, I don't care how cheesy it was, I love that stuff. And when I got older enough to identify how those things were made, it was even more of a love. And, Star Wars, Close Encounters, I mean, I would pick up Starlog and these magazines. I'm really dating myself, but it's something I cared about. And so when I had the chance to make content, the first instinct I had is like, man, I would love to tell the story of visual effects because it's something I get really geeked out about. So, we sent out an email to the guys at Industrial Light and Magic and said, hey, listen, I would love to come and do an interview. Now, they get their request all the time, but the key was, I want to talk to one of the guys who sits behind a monitor, 17 hours a day, never sees daylight. I want to tell his story. Now, that request doesn't come through too much, but what does it do? It puts a personal touch on the story, which itself is interesting. And you say, here's this guy doing the coolest job possible, making these fantastic creatures, and when you put a microphone or a camera on them, they just light up because they're telling a personal thing gets them so excited. And then you layer that with the production shots and how they made a particular scene, and you put it on the web. Well, now you've got a challenge. Like, how to get someone to see this fantastic piece of video? And the answer is, you start looking for communities. There's like visual effects communities all over the web. And Twitter, I found, is actually one of the most effective tools you can possibly use. And this comes from not believing that Twitter was worth anything in the early days. But, so lo and behold, I started looking on Twitter, and you can just put in the search tool, visual effects. And pretty soon you start identifying hashtags. And there's one particular hashtag VFX. And after time, I saw that there's some really amazing people hanging out there. And just as was suggested, I took this piece of content. I said, hey, guys, we have an interview with ILM, amazing behind the scenes of Iron Man. And lo and behold, all of a sudden, just as you said, 500 hits. I'm like, yes. Right? And then it goes to 10,000, and it goes to 30, 40, 50, 60, and it starts traveling because this group has a hub and spoke mentality. If you hit the key players that are really interested in that type of content, they'll spread it to their followers. And it's just really this great chain of reaction. And I'll give you another, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I will give you another concrete tip, is that if there's a blog out there that you follow, they most likely have a tip line. And take your content and say, on the tip line on the website, hey, check this out. I think you're really going to dig this because it fits in with what you guys are doing. Or if you can't find a tip line, just find the Twitter tag of one of the journalists that are contributing to the site. Go to them personally and send them a message saying, hey, you got to check this out. And this goes back to this other topic. And maybe 1 out of 10 will pick it up, but the 1 out of 10 will create another chain. So I think these things are all productive in getting your content out there.
I think just to add to that, I think one really important thing is if you're going to these places for the first time when you have the content, that's a lot less effective than being somebody who's from these places.
Yep.
So with the VFX thing, my guess is you were probably like involved in that community, talking and chatting with them all the time because you're down with the stuff.
Yep.
They
You're
knew who you
absolutely
were.
Right. That's
so
right.
when you went and shared your thing, they're like, oh, we know that guy. We talk to that guy all the time. We definitely gonna check that out.
This
Whereas
gets
if it's
into
like
trust.
some random person just coming in and just like spamming them with it.
Right? I mean, trust is one of your biggest assets in the online space. And you got to treat it as your most precious commodity. And I'm really protective. Like when I post something on Twitter, I really think about what I'm posting because it defines me as a person. I don't put pictures of my dog up there as much as I'd like to. But, it really, the things I do put up there develop a picture of myself as being a representative, a curator of content, and I put stuff out when I think it's important or worthwhile. And I think that feeds into your credibility in getting your own content.
Can I just tag on the idea of trust in a little bit of a different way, which is once you put something together, you have content, a show, in our case, a drama series, then first of all, I believe you need momentum. And why you're doing this is a very important question, too. Because if you're just doing it for a one-off, a one-shot, hope you get a job out of it, that's a whole different category. And trust goes along with, okay, I saw the first episode, I'm the audience now. That was pretty cool. When's the next one coming? Is there a next one coming? Is this one that comes of the same quality as the first one? And what are you doing in between those things to show people that we really need, appreciate, want your participation, and we want you as an audience. And we're going to do what we can, not in any seedy way, but to engage you and keep you. But I think, you know, that trust is, this is what we're going to do. And you can count on us to do it if you go along with us. And that people who see your work recognize it as your best efforts, just like any other work you do. You know, the web is not a place for things that are less than. You know, this is another territory where you can shine. And I just think that's really crucial.
Josh, you and David are both involved in organizations that celebrate and honor great web series creators and partnerships. Why do you think this is important to the web community?
I think, especially like what David said online, there's a ton of bad stuff online. And there's this problem with discovering entertainment that's worth watching in the online video space. So for every television show that you see on television or every movie that you go to in the theaters, there are tens of hundreds that didn't make it there because they went through whatever vetting process they did go through. Online, I mean, with the low-cost distribution and basically marginal cost of editing tools and filming tools these days, anyone can upload anything. So I think there's both a way that it functions as a useful utility for people to figure out what is some of the best stuff out there. And also, all of these people that are involved in the online video space put as much, if not more, work into it than people in traditional media, and those people should be celebrated just like everyone else.
Mike, this is an audience question. What are the minimums and essentials to make a pilot on the web? They're asking about money, equipment, crew, union status, etc.
I always equate this to, you know, as an actor, I always have conversations with my friends about how gone are the days where you walk in and audition for stuff and you get cast in a TV show. That still happens, but nowadays it's way more about making your own content, especially in comedy. So I'd say with equipment and the behind-the-scenes stuff, I don't really see a difference. There are kids making comedy videos because they want to be writers and actors. Well, there's somebody with a camera that wants to do the same thing. So, I mean, I always think the favors are like such an amazing resource in creating online content. I think Josh mentioned, you know, the cost of good enough camera equipment and lights and stuff is certainly cheaper than it was, but for a lot of people it's sort of still very expensive. So, I mean, I think the minimum, our Tiny Apartment episodes cost whatever a case of Bud Light cans cost. We had a director with a camera. He would come over every weekend and we would ply him with beer. And that's how we made the show that ultimately got picked up to go to pilot at Comedy Central. So I think in terms of thinking, oh, what do I have to spend? What do I have to, you know, do? I think your time is probably better spent seeking out other people who want to work in the different aspects, you know, that will be an essential ingredient in what you're making. If you're writing and performing in it, somebody has to shoot it, and somebody wants to. It's just a matter of finding those people.
Great. Here. Oh, David, what do you think makes certain content rise to the top? Since we talk about there's so much bad content, but it doesn't seem to be always visual quality, and like Mike was saying, sometimes it doesn't take very much at all to make a good series. What do you think makes that content stand out?
It's a big question. I think it, first of all, depends on the type of content, right? And I see a lot of content that is not made for me, that is very, very popular, and that when I watch it, I recognize that it's good for who it's for, just not relevant to me. And I think that's sort of the point is, there's content that's really relevant for a certain group of people. And I actually think there's a lot of content on YouTube, for instance, from people that are very popular and get lots of views, which is made, I think, essentially for, like 15, 14 to 18 or 19-year-olds. And I think that's super cool and awesome. And that content really resonates with those people. And it's not, I think that somebody who's like my age who watches it probably doesn't totally get it or whatever, but it's because I'm not in high school, and I don't go to high school, and I don't talk to kids about what kids in high school talk about. And so I don't relate to the content like they do, and like these kids do. And the thing that's interesting is that these kids have their own stars now, right? It's these kids, other kids that are a little bit older than them that are on YouTube, and that are talking about things that are important to them. And it's like really like their own personal stars. And when I was a kid, like my personal star was, like Sam from Cheers or something, or these like older guys on TV. Like we didn't have the same type of, we didn't have content that was so directly relevant to the life we were living. It wasn't made by people that were literally our same age and going through the same things. It was made by these much older people who were trying to guess at what we were going through. So I think, a really long answer is that people can really relate to it. And it doesn't mean that everybody has, that's one thing I think that's really been proven is to be wildly popular doesn't mean that everybody in the world needs to relate to it. Hundreds of thousands of views can come from a very specific niche audience. You can get millions of views or hundreds of thousands of views from, 24 to 28-year-olds or 18 to 22-year-olds who are in college, and it's content that's all about the East Coast, or I don't know what it would be, but very, very specific. And I think that's a totally new thing, because in the past we've really looked at entertainment content being successful and popular if it was really broad, because in order to sort of suffer the economics of television and the movie industry, it had to be so broad that almost anybody would be interested in watching it to get onto television, to eventually be good. And then only the content that was so broad that it was almost impossible to be interesting, if you really think about it. Some of that actually became really popular and cool because it somehow defied the logic of the world, essentially, right? And actually, stuff that's really niche and tailored for very specific groups and specific people is much more interesting. So I think that's the key thing, and you touched on it with the IKEA thing, which I think is a great example. There's all these people who are really into IKEA, there's all these people who are really into everything, and figuring out what your content, you talked about this too, I think thinking about, who are the types of people that are really into your content is really what's gonna drive success.
May I just to piggyback off what you were saying about the Sam from Cheers thing and how kids have their own sort of stars on the internet. There's also a certain interactivity to that that's very different than watching Cheers as a kid. And I think as a content creator, it's very important for you to, if somebody comments on a video or somebody posts it on Twitter, as much as you can, to every once in a while just go and say thanks or even favorite something, because it's gonna, doesn't matter to you, it's not like a huge deal to you, but to some 13-year-old kid that thinks your stuff is really funny, that means the world to them. So I think there is a lot of like, a right attitude about the interactivity and being smart with that as well.
Just to comment on that real quick, there's some of these teenagers that look up to some of these stars that David-Michel was talking about, like Smosh or like Jenna Marbles. In their Twitter bios, they have the dates at which Smosh or Jenna Marbles retweeted them or favorited one of their tweets, it carries a ton of currency in that world. And so it's definitely a really good point where you should totally explore those options.
And this goes for creators too, not just the stars of the show. I mean, I retweeted or answered someone, and she said, "Oh my God, Susan Miller tweeted me," and I'm like, "Wow." You know, I mean, we do this all the time, but just that little remark made me realize just, you know, how important that interaction is. And just one other thing about their stars. One thing I also loved about the web, and this is a little different, but it's in our casting. You know, total unknowns coming right from NYU and Rutgers. And my belief was, and they're terrific, of course, and had a lot of chemistry. And before you know it, these people are recognized. They have fan clubs because they're doing the same thing. The fans are then discovering them. You know, they are taking them as their own, and I think that's a great thing on the web.
Susan, I want to broaden that a little bit, though, since you were talking about interaction with your audience. How does that influence future work you do, if it does at all?
You mean, will I have people out there who want to see my work, or?
I mean, does it influence future projects you create once you get that response?
Well, I think it's tremendously encouraging, and I think again, we've built trust and expectations, so I think we can, you know, ask those people, hey, we have something new, we hope that you'll get on board. One thing people ask in interactivity, people have asked us this, I'm not sure that this follows what you're saying, but is if fans write in and say, because, you know, why are those two together? You know, we like this relationship. Well, you build on that, but you don't change anything for them. I mean, we don't. We don't ask, well, how would you end this series? No. But because of that, we get people really riled up. I mean, people made T-shirts, for example, when one of their favorite couples, you know, was split. And you just look at that and you go, okay, all right, we have to feed the fire on that. But I don't think there's anything in all my experience, even in the theater, like the loyalty and the passion of fans for our web series.
Can I give a little bit of a different spin on that question? And this is kind of a very nerdy, and I own that. I am a nerd, but I do own that. But there's actually another way you can gauge people's reactions without saying a single word, without them typing a single word. And I'm going to get back to metrics. The first time I opened up YouTube Analytics, it blew my mind that you can see on a second-by-second basis how people are engaging with your content. And it shows, you know, it's almost like watching, during an election, watching how people, during a debate, you know, you have those little meters that people turn the dial. I mean, it's almost identical to that. So you see your video on the side, and a playhead is just moving along, tracing how people are engaged, and you can get a lot of information from that. I learned very quickly that putting up a talking head for an extended period of time, people start to tune out. I mean, you know, people have it's true. I mean, people who are using this medium have a very short attention span and have a great deal of respect for people that do long-form content, because that's really, to develop a loyalty for that kind of content is extremely challenging. You're asking a lot of people who don't necessarily treat the medium is that kind of like lean back experience. But just in a broader sense, when you look at these charts, these live real-time charts, you can start to get a pretty good idea of like what it is about your content that's resonating with your audience. And if you see a slope that kind of starts going like this, you mean people are like, you know what, this isn't working for me. And you learn very quickly when you have one of those videos where they're with you for about 10, 15 seconds and the slope starts going down very quickly. You know that's just a piece of content that's just not resonating. And that kind of feedback is extremely valuable because the next time you do a video, it's like, you know what, I'm going to pull back a little bit. I'm not going to show a talking head for as long. I'm going to layer in a piece of video that may sort of be interesting and stimulating. But it's even more than just video. It's like there's things that resonate with people, and music is a huge part of it. And it's far beyond this discussion. I'm not going to take the time to talk about where you find licensed music. And, you know, look, people use unlicensed music all the time, but as you start to get into more serious video, you have to take it in consideration. And there are, just do a Google search, there's plenty of libraries out there where you can get quality music, but music can help propel people emotionally when, say, the on-screen action isn't doing its part. And there's also the same thing with graphics. You do not have to be an After Effects expert. There's so many tools baked into Final Cut 10, Premiere. I mean, just go down the list. Hit them with an interesting piece of content, like a lower third. Like just if you have to start out with one of the inbuilt templates, use it. And say it's like give them a fact, an unexpected fact. Like all those layers of content, you will see over time if you keep going back to your chart how your audience engagement improves. And what's really awesome, I mean, it gets back to this the first time you see like your first million view video, is when you look at your engagement chart and it never drops below, say, 80 or 90%. If you see a chart where it starts out like this and it stays like this all the way to the very end, you know you've done something really well and people like it. And then you keep on doing that. And just here's a little tip. Those charts can sometimes go up above 100%. And you say, well, how could that be over 100%? What could be more than 100%? What it means is that people loved what you showed them so much, they actually stopped the playhead, dragged it back, and let it play again. And sometimes it might do that 2 or 3 times, and you see 130% engagement, and that's one of the best feelings in the world.
Quickly, just to say that our fans of the whole first season were upset because our episodes weren't longer. Yeah, which is a great thing, except, and we couldn't say, we had to say it in a way to educate them, and other fans did it for us, because it costs money. But to have people want more rather than less, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that is very cool.
Let's see here. David, the way that online storytelling is being created, digested, and is constantly changing, can you tell us what it's like keeping up with that landscape as far as the streaming? Oh, sorry, I meant Josh. Wait. Can you tell us what it's like keeping up with the changing landscape of new media?
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff. It's hard to keep up.
Thank you. Next. No. Great. Okay, moving on.
I used to brag about, like in 2008, 2009, I used to brag about how I watched everything, and now that's way no longer. It's been about like 2 or 3 years since that's been even close to being possible. We stay up to speed. It's crazy. So when we first started out, we got mostly tips from independent content creators, and now we get tips from independent content creators and their PR teams, and the PR teams from major motion studios and television networks. So in terms of just the content and programming, that's how we stay up to speed with that. And then watching a lot of YouTube, and it's interesting to see the evolution of the different types of programming that has appeared online in the past 4 or 5 years, where you have everything from these long-form dramatic series like what Susan's doing, to short-form comedies, to this new style of kind of talking head vlogger videos, which couldn't exist on any other medium. And now we're seeing like Peter Chernin and AT&T just announced that they're releasing a series following the lives of 9 high schoolers that just in their days before they leave to college in Southern California, that's going to take place on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and on YouTube and Vine. And they basically have a social media staff of 45 people that these kids are taking the pictures and shooting the videos and doing the tweets, and it gets all uploaded to one central location where then the staff of 45 distributes that through all their different social media networks. I think when the internet first came around, when online video first started to gain some prominence and some steam in like 2006, 2007, we saw lots of really innovative ways that people were using the inherent connectivity and interactivity of the web to influence storytelling. That then died out a little bit because the economic models didn't necessarily support that. But now we're starting to see that again, especially with the prevalence of Facebook and Twitter and all these other social media platforms evolving.
David, this is the question I had for you. What's it been like to see the web video go more mainstream over time?
Interesting is that it's gotten better, which is the key thing, right? So, and I think, we at the Webbies, we started honoring online video. I think it was, I want to say 2006 or 7. It was just after YouTube came out, and the big change for us, the reason we said, hey, this is something we need to start honoring now, is it suddenly just became really easy for regular people to watch video on the internet. And that actually, people kind of forget, but it was really hard to watch video. Like, you had to download a codec, and you had to get the right player and have the right file. And I mean, even if you knew what you were doing, it could literally take like 15 minutes just to set it up. And I think Adobe or Macromedia at the time came out with like this Flash 7 player and made it so you could just push this play button. And as soon as it became easy to watch it, then all of a sudden all these other people are like, wow, I can actually make it and people can see it now. And we saw all this new video that started coming out. And some of it was really good, and it's not surprising. It's just like anything. There's really talented, undiscovered people in the world all the time. And they suddenly had an opportunity to sort of publish and share and create this work. And they started doing so, and we said, you know what? There's going to be really big, talented people who come from this. This is something we need to start honoring. And so, even at the beginning, there was some very, very good work that was being created, but there was a lot of other work that wasn't as great. And now it's so mainstream. And I talked a little bit at this year's show. We honored Jerry Seinfeld for this show that he did online called Comedians in Car Getting Coffee. We had the cast that we honored Burning Love for that show. If you guys don't know it, you should definitely check it out. It's a great online series. And those are, that was produced by Ben Stiller and has all sorts of like fancy Hollywood celebrities in it. And but those are very, very good quality projects. And to me, it's exciting to see that it's not just a place where it's like, oh, I can't make it over here, so I'm going to go try and make it on the internet. And then if I do good there, then I'll be able to get onto television. It's exciting to see that it's a destination in its own, and that really talented people recognize that they have freedoms and a lack of a formula. There's sometimes a freedom and ability to do things in these places that they don't have. Even somebody like Jerry Seinfeld, who you think can basically do anything he wants anywhere, it's exciting for him to go do that on the internet and really do whatever he wants and make the episodes as long as he wants. And so I think it's a great thing for the medium. I think it's a great thing for the community of people who do it, because it really validates the space that has become so mainstream. And most importantly, though, it gets more and more people used to watching video content on the internet. And that's actually, I think, one of the biggest challenges. For the amount so many people are watching content online, but really the biggest challenge for like sort of the online video industry, I still think, is getting regular people used to sitting back and watching entertainment or information or news on the internet, not while they're just at their desk during lunch at work. Right?
Yeah, and I would jump on that. I mean, like the big question is, even if you can get eyeballs, how am I going to make money doing this thing? I mean, because at the end of the day, you can have a huge following, and that could be fantastic, and you get a great sense of satisfaction. But how do you turn that into a piece of sustainable business? And it is, if any of you have the idea, please see me afterwards, because I'll cut you in for a piece of the action. But no, I mean, really, it's a very serious thing. And as you start to, say if you take that jump from being like, just a casual producer of content to start amping it up to being, involved in bigger and broader productions, or working for a company that's trying to figure this out, and firsthand knowledge of this is that you are confronted daily with multiple tasks. How do I get this looked at? How am I going to get a sponsor to think this is worthwhile? How am I going to actually bridge the questions of editorial versus advertising? How do I harmonize those two things? Because there is a conflict. Sometimes you want to have content that's super awesome, and it may rely on the sponsorship of a company, but you don't want to be perceived as selling your soul to get that content made, because then, getting back to the trust issue, you'll lose people's trust. So I think that you'll hear a lot of conversations going on the next several years. And this is Peter Chernan's idea is fantastic. I'll check it out. But you have to ask yourself, 45 people. It's like, what is it, 9 people, 5 people dedicated to each person, more or less? I mean, that's a huge investment. And you think about it, I mean, it's tweeting and using Vine. I mean, these are not expensive tools. I mean, that model can be undercut tomorrow by 3 very smart teenagers working out of a basement. So, you know?
I was going to say, it'd be funny if they were all kids.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
hired it's a room full of kids just...
Exactly.
Jumping off of that, Susan, what does it mean to have a branded series?
Right. Anyone But Me is not a branded series, and which means, as compared to, that we had to raise the money ourselves. We had an angel-type person invest in not invest, but actually give us the money for the first 2 seasons with the understanding that we needed momentum and we would raise the money for the 3rd. I tell you this because I'm going to compare it in a moment. And so the 3rd season, we did something. We weren't Kickstarter for us. It wasn't quite, it didn't have the cachet that it has now or the actual power that it seems to have now. We did a webathon. Had never been done before, and we ended up, of course, spending a great deal of time putting together 90 minutes of original free video for people, but we had a blast, and the fans were fantastic. We pretended everybody was there. You know, we did it, we aired them one at a time over 3 nights, and we raised $33,000 from our fans for a 3rd season. The branded series that I worked on, Bestsellers, is about women of different ages and different occupations who have a book club. I was asked to write something for this company who find work for women. They were looking to do a web series, and because of Anyone But Me, they came to me. Well, in this case, I got paid something. I didn't take a salary for Anyone But Me. So I got paid a little something, and they paid for the production costs. So anyone who worked on the show was paid. I didn't have to go out and raise money for it. This particular branded web series was more of a sponsorship. So in the beginning, it said sponsored by. There were no product placements in this because that's not the kind of service they provided. So it was kind of the best possible way to have a branded web series. They were very hands-off. You know, I came up with the idea of a book club with all of these different women because what they needed was something that spoke to working women. And that is my experience with a branded web series. Now, Anyone But Me, with all of our success, we won the first Writers Guild of America award ever given for new media. We were Webby nominees. We were Streamy winners. We did all of these things, and yet we could not get sponsorship. So that, I hope, is changing now, but you raised that, you know, big question that people still ask. I think maybe these fellows can tell you a little more about the various types of branded web series. I mean, they're obviously, though, sponsored by people who have money, who want you to different, varying degrees, to either meet their kind of agenda for the kinds of work they do, or put their products in your show, you know, or do extra videos on the side to promote their products, and that's pretty much my experience with it.
Anybody else have any other comment about branded web series they wanted to add?
I think that we get a lot of entries in brand. We have a couple categories for branded series, and frankly, the work tends to be really good because there's actual budgets there, and they go out and they hire really talented people. And I think, as you're saying, is that I think sometimes it's also refreshing for people who've been working in the web space to suddenly just get a paycheck and not have to deal with all the things we've been talking about here. I think it ends up being it can be I think for the people working on it, can also be fun because, again, there's a budget there, but, it's not television. It doesn't necessarily have to be 22 minutes. It doesn't have to be exactly this formula. It could be shorter, longer, all those freedoms that they don't have elsewhere are there. And I think we're going to, I think generally you're going to see a lot of that type of content online because it's frankly the only thing so far that seems to pay the bills, I guess I would say. And I think it's I think it's very difficult to say like, oh, I'm going to create this series and I'm going to go get Intel to sponsor it. I think that's sort of a little bit of a pipe dream. It happens, but I think that it's really more, those things really evolve more in collaboration with those products and companies and brands. And so if you have those type of relationships, I think it's really attractive and something that you really can think about pursuing. I think if you don't, the idea of like sort of conceiving something entirely on your own and then going to them is, from our perspective, not something I see happen a lot.
Jumping off another question about crew and funding, Mike, do you have any recommendations for finding great collaborators on little to no budget, aside from promising them beer?
Good question. I've always tried to run in communities. I just have a ton of friends that are comedians and work in that world. I think it all probably comes down to networking. There's always the option of like a Craigslist or something like that, but I always feel like there's got to be somebody 3 degrees of separation away where you can reach out and say, hey, do you know anybody? I mean, I think it's sometimes valuable to go on Facebook and be like, hey, does anybody have a camera and willing to shoot this weekend? And you'll get answers. So I think finding people is more about networking and asking friends and stuff. And everybody that works crew-wise and stuff has a reel. So even if you don't know them, if you're in a situation where you're sort of putting your trust in somebody that you don't know, chances are they have a reel. And you can go look at it. That's another one of the beauties of YouTube. Yeah, I think that's probably how I would go about it.
Speaking about moving forward with the mediums, Scott, what are some examples of content that exists in multiple places?
Do you mean, can you narrow that down a little bit? Like exist in multiple places in different mediums or different?
Yes.
Think about that. I mean, that's a real hard one to answer. I mean, there's content, I think that the answer is it needs to kind of live in a reliable place. You need to kind of know where to find it. So, I mean, it's a hard one to answer because your content can get picked up and placed anywhere. And as a matter of fact, more than several times I've seen my content ripped from its container on YouTube and show up places where I'll never get any credit for it. And that kind of bothers me a little bit. But then I think about it from another perspective, like, well, there's one more person that's going to see it. So maybe I'll just develop another person that wants to see more of my stuff. So, but that gets tricky where you're really dependent on monetizing your content. And when you start to get up in fairly large number of views, that can become consequential. So you have to kind of control that, and there's ways of controlling it, but another time, another subject. But I think that where it can live, I mean, it's just a hard one to answer. I think that, I look at each piece of content as something that can live no matter where it has to because it reaches the right people who care about it, right? And so it originates on YouTube and it'll end up being on Facebook, or it'll end up being in Twitter. Someone will tweet it and it's embedded video from that source. So I look at more of like just what's the original source of it and does it have value?
Are you talking about multi-platforms?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And which I only learned really a lot more about this because I was at the World Conference of Screenwriters in Barcelona. I was very lucky to be a speaker at this, but the two guys who preceded me blew me away because I didn't even imagine making a series the way they did, which is, in one case, it had to do with a scavenger hunt. It had to do with going to a theater as well as the small screen. So basically, what I gleaned from that is as many you say it has to live somewhere, but it reminds me of an art exhibit I saw once that I really loved. Jennifer Bartlett was the artist. But anyway, she had a scene painted and then a three-dimensional object from that scene as well. And at the time, to me, that was just, wow. And I think that's what the experimentation is. You probably know more about this. Yes? No?
I mean, in terms of multi-platforms and I think that's kind of what the example like Peter Chernan's doing, or there's a great web series called The Lizzie Bennet Diaries, which if you haven't seen it, you should. It's the story of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice told through the vantage point of a 20-something female who has a YouTube channel, and her name is Lizzie Bennet, and she talks to the camera. And so you can watch all 100 episodes that tell the whole story of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice on her YouTube page. And also, if you get more into it, she interacts with her sister Lydia. She interacts with her sister Lydia Bennet on Lydia Bennet's YouTube page, and on Instagram, and on Facebook, and on Twitter. And with all of the other characters involved, they created this whole world that exists where you can watch it on the YouTube channel, but then if you're hardcore and you get into it, you can see all these other interactions that are all over the place. And the people who designed it were really smart about it. So they might have Lydia and Lizzie tweeting back and forth to each other about some episodes or about the series even before the series even starts.
I think that evolved. I mean, I really, it's funny because when I was looking at multi-platforms for all of the various contests that we had to judge, I didn't look at Lizzie Bennet as a multi-platform thing. Maybe it's evolved, but some other thing where you can stop, you can stop an action and you can, change the course of events, or you can make it, you can, enlarge it. This is not something that we did on Anyone But Me. You should also watch Anyone But Me. Okay. Thank you. Although Josh here is one of my biggest
definitely watch Anyone But
supporters,
Me.
but thank you. Sit up here and they tell you to watch these other shows.
I think from just a super simple example, which I actually think is really great marketing, is like when people have shows and then the characters tweet in character. And I don't know if Mad Men still does this or not. They were doing it for a while, but there's lots of online shows that do this. And I think it's really smart. You start following characters on Twitter, they start talking about things happening, they tweet as themselves, you're building like a social network, but it also ties into the narrative. It's really not hard to do, right? It's hard to, write great tweets, but in terms of like costs and stuff, it's not necessarily so expensive. So I think that's a great thing to pursue. And, I think any way that, especially we're talking to a bunch of actors, or I would imagine, or hopeful actors and or current actors, I think that any way that you can bring the characters to life in other places on the internet, which don't necessarily have to be like the core focus, but where there are networks that other people can follow them and be interested in them and share them and all that kind of stuff, can really help with bringing more people, I think, to watching.
I would probably just add, it's not in the context of the types of content we're talking about right now, but you can start to see where things are heading. The sci-fi show Defiance is a big experiment in crossing platforms. And I see a little bit more of the original question you're getting at, but it's like, and it kind of it's touching on these types of experiments where you start in one world, you move over to another, and your actions in one then affect the other, and it's a big sort of dynamic circle. And time will kind of tell whether those experiments work. But there's also some things on the horizon that are incredibly interesting and they're worth watching. You can see the way things are evolving. I'm particularly interested in Oculus Rift. It's solely right now, this is kind of a video game concept for those of you who do not know what Oculus Rift is. An Oculus Rift is effectively, it's a goggle that goes over your eyes, and it's using very cheap sensors to detect head motion. And right now, we're at a point where current computers and systems can drive a virtual experience where you're looking around and you're seeing that world. And I was actually kind of waiting to see if the PS4, the new Xbox, would have enough horsepower to drive an Oculus Rift. And I don't think it's going to be in this generation, but it'll probably be in the next. And you kind of take a look at where Xbox is one story. PlayStation 4 is opening up very much to independent producers. And again, it's in the context of video games, but it's not that far of a leap to think that you can create a piece of content that could tap into that kind of a system, and they're making an open architecture where you can push your content, that your form of storytelling can be much more than just a video camera. I mean, maybe it's a little bit of sci-fi forward thinking, but I really actually think that the way you interact socially or have social engagements might make that leap into this kind of immediacy. And I think it's just something worth looking at and anticipating.
Going down the line, what do you guys see as predictions of new trends coming from web video? Josh?
I see a lot more investment into the space. I think it's a great time to be producing web content because I think there's going to be a lot more money flowing into it. In like 2006, 2007, when YouTube first started to gain some prominence, there was a lot of money being poured into the online video space with the idea, with kind of the Silicon Valley idea that they use with other social networks where, hey, we're going to throw a lot of money at this, we're going to get a ton of user acquisition and a ton of views, and then we'll figure out how to monetize that later. Not many of those types of companies survived that got a lot of that money in 2006, 2007, but now there's a little bit more defined economics to the system, and people are figuring out how to generate revenue in different ways, and there's more revenue to be generated because more advertisers are getting interested in advertising in the online video space. So I think that's causing a lot more investment in terms of production. There's been some huge investments in some YouTube multi-channel networks from companies, from big media conglomerates like Comscore and other big investment groups like Peter Chernin and some other people that are spawning, I think, a lot of new program developing, and we're going to see that for the at least relatively near future.
I think there's one big one which is like kind of happening, but I think hasn't totally happened yet, and it'll take some time just because is when your television, when it's basically as easy to watch something on the internet through your television as it is to watch like ABC, for not just like 5% of the people who like just bought the latest and greatest television, but for everybody, that's a huge change. I think you see it this year with like House of Cards and Netflix. It's not just as easy, but it can be almost as easy to watch something through Netflix on your TV as it is to watch. You have to go do a few things and change the setting, but it's not like it used to be. You don't have to hook up another computer and all these crazy things. And that basically means that there's all sorts of new programming that people are watching through Netflix that they weren't watching before. And so I think as you see these TVs connect directly to the internet, where the menus actually change so you can access the stuff directly, that'll really make a big difference, because it'll make it that instead of just watching this type of content when you're at work, or for the few who watch it at home who are really into it, everybody will be able to really easily, the key is always easy, easily watch it at home. And I think that actually opens up a huge opportunity for everybody who's making it.
Can I ask a question of a fellow panelist? I think that the one thing I'm really curious about, because I do say that, I mean, if you believe the rumors, and I have no inside knowledge, but I mean, there is an Apple TV coming, and when you have apps on your television, a lot of this just changes the game. But I mean, I'm just kind of curious, like, there's such a Twitch mentality to consuming media on the internet that there's still like, there's almost like this wall that exists between like what you consider web content and television, right? House of Cards or the new, Arrested Development series, it's still television. It has that whole wrapper of television, whereas, new discovery of a web series, like, you got to get me in the first 6 or 7 seconds or I'm just out of here. Whereas, a minute or two, 10 minutes go by of, the first episode of Arrested Development kind of falls flat. You're like, well, I'll give us a chance. And maybe into the 5th or 6th episode. But I don't think people are willing to give that yet to web content. It's like, there's almost like this demand on the creator. It's like, hit me hard and hit me fast, because if you're not going to do it, I'm out of here, and I'm one click away from someone who's going to do that for me. So I think it's like, even if you got on the TV, it's like, how do you get away from that Twitch response?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with where they're watching it and what they've like settled down to do when they're watching it, right? And when you're at your desk and you don't have a lot of time and there's all this other stuff happening, it's just a different, you have a different attitude towards it, I think. And I think that when you're at your couch, you're in a different mode there, and it's actually more difficult to move around on the sort of the menu of your television, I find anyway, than it is to move around on your computer, right? So I think that really, I think that fuels a lot of it, frankly, is just the where you are. I'm sure there's a lot of other psychological things going on there, but I think that's a key thing.
I think it also depends on the kind of material. One of the trends I hope will happen is that more drama on the web. I think that people do settle down for that. I don't, I do believe you have to get people quickly, but I've never written anything to sacrifice the story or the visual part of the story to that concept. So, part of it is I think the web has influenced this sort of what's the word for it when you're watching everything all at once?
Binge watching.
Binge watching. Our fans really do it a lot, and I've taken to it myself. I think it's because there's too many interruptions. Our fans also they binge watch, and they watch it over and over and over. But I think that with this I think that especially speaking to a lot of actors, I'm assuming out here, that even with the multi-platforms, even with the fun and the necessity of social media, that there are people who are creating, and you will probably be among them, dramas and comedies, let's say, that are cast with live human beings. And, I would just personally love to see the quality of that. I think it is starting to improve, but I'd like to see more of it and the quality of it. And I think what you're talking about, David, about watching on television, people in my age range, they know, except for a couple of really, really close friends, those fuckers have not watched my show. I know it.
If someone was going to say it, it was definitely going to be you, Susan.
So I am hoping that the audience enlarges to include, people of all ages.
But I think that's actually a really important point. And the sort of corollary is there's all this talk about Americans are watching millions of hours of online video now. Everybody's cutting the cord. The part about that that's not really discussed is it's not instead of watching TV. It's in addition to. So people are watching millions of hours of online video at work. They never used to watch video at work before. They're still watching the same amount of television at home, if not more than they used to watch. And it is a generational thing where there's all these young people who grew up watching stuff online, and they watch a lot of online video at home. But there is an older generation. I think I'm probably like right in the in-between part of it. Like it's just the younger than me is essentially native to watching online video at home all the time, and older is not, essentially. And I think as like I die, that there'll be more people sort of used to watching all of this everywhere.
I think my thing for the future isn't necessarily a hope or a prediction, but more of like a concern. And I wonder, we have all these like digital studios popping up every day. It's like we have our above averages and all these studios. So I wonder if I wonder if it's going to become something where it's more impossible to do things yourself to get noticed than it has been. And I wonder if 20 years from now we look back into this sort of twilight age where all these people sort of got their career kickstarted by being able to go out and do whatever they want cheaply, And I worry about it sort of being, going the way of sort of the Hollywood, where it's just these big studios and it's just another medium that's almost impossible to get into.
Do you think, this is a question for I'm sorry, but do you all think, and you as well, that it's going to be more celebrity-driven, the web?
I think it's going to be celebrity-driven, but those celebrities can come from the web too. So traditional celebrities, yes, but like David-Michel was saying, it's and you too, it's more of a generational thing, where I don't think, while Seinfeld's comedian cars getting coffee might appeal to an older demo, I don't think it's like a gateway drug to watching things online. I think we're going to see a huge shift in the amount of people that watch stuff online in those older demographics as the younger demographics who are native to it get older.
I don't know. I mean, it's a really valid question because it's really hard to get eyeballs. I mean, you can crack the code for a particular month, maybe, or a particular subject matter, but to hold that audience is really challenging, right? I mean, you always have to you have to come up with something that's surprising, engaging, but even, I mean, people just get so desensitized so quickly to the most exciting thing. You know, it's like 1 month, you know, I don't have to be picked up viral content, but you know, it's just on fire and it's everywhere. Like Harlem Shake, people couldn't get enough of that. Now you can't give that away at all. But I mean, you know, it's hard to say. I mean, like, I really, and the more I think about it, it's that short form, you really have two pathways to getting your audience. You can use short form, which is easier to produce and can produce quicker results, and it's quicker to iterate and experiment. But because it's so easy, you're kind of constantly competing against other people trying to do the same thing. Long form, on the other hand, is extremely difficult. And again, it's a great deal of respect for the people able to crack it, because if you can get to the point where you have enough momentum and you've got enough cash or resources to get you over that hump of developing your audience, you're more likely to keep them for a longer period of time. So I mean, it's almost like you gotta choose your path, and you know, I mean, it's like Narcissus and Goldman. Like, you can either stay in the ivory tower for your whole life and work that way, or go out in the fields and kind of take the ups and the downs. I guess you got to kind of decide which path you're going to choose.
Well, I think with things like above average, even above average, while they're putting out very good content and stuff that seems very Hollywood, they are still having difficulty with the engagement of their audience, which is something that I think all creators, smaller creators, have the advantage of. So that's my 2 cents on it.
I also think, though, there's celebrity and then there's talent. And I don't mean talent like in talent, but in that, like, being talented. And a lot of celebrities are very talented. There's other celebrities who aren't talented, and they're celebrities for other reasons. And I don't know whether or not online video will be driven by those people or not. But I think that you know, really talented people become celebrities because they're really good. And so I think that maybe it's not a traditional Jerry Seinfeld, as you're saying, but you know, it's other talented people that arise and eventually will be what we call celebrities because they're really good at it and they're funny, or they make us care about them in some really meaningful way. And I think on some level, all content is celebrity driven in that way. Maybe the first time you read the article from the great writer that you've never heard of, he's not a celebrity to you, but the 10th time you read the article, he is, because he's a great writer, and whether that's an actor or any other type of.
Well, I mean, you're talking about
producer.
quality, and my first question really had more to do with, you know, our shows, web things are going to get financed because of a name, not necessarily, and a name in and of itself doesn't mean that person isn't wonderful and talented, of course, but you know, the question, and this has arisen too for Kickstarter, which, you know, in which some, you know, people who have made a lot of money on television and film are now going after money on Kickstarter, and it's like, hey, you know, and so I just wondered what the feeling was.
It just brings it full circle back to that issue of trust, you know. Maybe the lifespan of a show is super short, but the person who created it really caught you for the amount of time that they put the time and effort into creating it, that you can't wait to see what they're going to do next. So And like, I'm kind of looking at, the issue of who's a star these days. I mean, I could point to a couple of people I think are big stars on YouTube. Freddie W., like this guy who, he really taps into, he knows how to tap into the zeitgeist of people who like action, pop culture, and he finds a way to like make it just incredibly engaging. And he's one of those new media types that knows how to pull the levers and work his own visual effects, and he has a small crew, and they operate super cheap, but I can't wait to see what he's going to do next. And if he were to have a show on TV, I'd check it out. I'd follow that guy around. So like the definition of a star, I guess, is someone who delivers, whether delivering a performance, delivering a new novel, or delivering a new experience through short form or long form.
I guess that brings me to another question I wanted to go down the line with, which was, who are you seeing do something, whether it's a channel or a specific creator, who are you seeing doing something really cool right now? Or at least you think so.
Besides you.
Oh, no, going down, do we have to go down the line? Well, the fact is that at the moment, because I've been concentrating on writing a new play while I'm on this sort of break from writing a web series, I haven't been totally paying attention, so I pass.
I think the one I mentioned before, the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, is doing some really smart stuff. They're going to come out with another season or another reinterpretation of a Jane Austen novel soon. And then I think kind of juxtaposing that with, there's a YouTube channel, How To Basic, which shows you, if you put those two together, I think it shows you the breadth of the kinds of things that can be popular on YouTube. How To Basic is a how-to show that probably in like 45 to 90 seconds will show you not how to do whatever it is it says it's showing you how to do in like a very violent, aggressive fashion. And it's phenomenally popular, and I think by comparing those two, you can see kind of that's the range. Those are two ends of the spectrum, where it's some silly thing that's easily reproducible, that is jarring and compelling, compared to this very well thought out scripted series that has lots of these different transmedia components. I think that's a good kind of 1-2 about what's popular online right now.
What I find really interesting is a lot of sort of more independent or niche content companies that didn't come from video, that are now making video, and have been great at making other types of content, particularly print content. So like Pitchfork, for people who are into music, has like Pitchfork TV and they make like all these great music documentaries now. And I think that's so cool that, now like Pitchfork's making a really great video, and other ones like Vice is a very similar thing. They've been making video for a little bit longer, but and Wired and even like the New York Times that has been making video for a long time now, but that was like a new thing for them. And like NPR, National Public Radio, makes great video, and I think it's not probably exactly what you guys are making, because it's not so character driven and storytelling. Some of it's storytelling, but it's not so character driven. But I think that's really interesting and cool, and one of the really fun things about online video is that it's given these other content companies a new vehicle to sort of do what they've been doing, but just in a new way.
Can I just tout TubeFilter here and Josh Cohen, because we're telling you what series to watch, and reading TubeFilter will give you insight and information like no other online journal that I can think of.
Thank you. And you should definitely watch Anyone But Me before or after you read TubeFilter.
I'm a late night television junkie. I love it all. SNL and Jimmy Fallon are probably like my two favorite shows. And it sounds like a real no-brainer, but it's actually only recently that those stations, the CBSs and NBCs and ABCs, decided to chop those up and put them out as individual, sketch pieces and little interviews. And they had been doing it for a long time before, but they were always hoarding them on their own websites with embedded players that hardly ever worked. And then I think it started sort of with Hulu, and then my friend's a writer on Fallon, and he told me a story where he had to like really fight with them to get them to start putting their stuff on YouTube, which is just still, for a lot of people, the easiest way to watch that stuff. So I'm happy, as somebody who doesn't always get to see everything, I know I can easily go and find whatever I want the next day. So it's not necessarily web content, but that's where I'm finding it a lot of the time now, which I like.
I'd say stepping away from just individual people like Freddie W. I definitely encourage you to check out his stuff, but there's a lot of people like that. But I actually think one of the most exciting things right now, and I think this will apply or resonate with this particular audience, is that last year there were about 6 or 7 short videos. It was on Vimeo or YouTube. It didn't make a difference, but the approach was the same. There was a script, and someone said, well, you know, I'm having a hard time getting this script made. I think it's awesome. But what they did is they took 7 minutes of this particular screenplay, and they made it. And there were 7 of these, like a bunch of these last year, and they tend to be a little bit more sci-fi related. There was Ruin, which was one. Just type in Ruin short animation. But there was Ruin, Prototype, More Than Human. But they were seriously engrossing, and it picks up the action, and it just expects nothing of you other than you're right there in the action. It's not telling you too much about the characters. You have to just, you know, discover the next 7 minutes. And you get so transfixed in this portion of the story that you want to know more. And what that resulted in was a bunch of, you know, CAA or William Morris. I mean, they basically went out and signed these people up within probably about, I say it was no joke, it was probably about 72 hours they had development deals. Because the response to this was so great by the audience. Yeah, no, really, I mean, look it up. It's like, I think Fox picked one up, and, you know, they're now in, some of these are in like serious development. But, you know, I think there's a huge opportunity. Like, you know, if you get together with a group of your friends, like, man, do you have a screenplay? You know, let's just get it out there. And you go pick like that moment that's pivotal or really interesting and make it. And go rely on one of your friends who's an After Effects wizard and say, hey, can you help me goose this and make it like look really professional? And look, you could shoot on your iPhone, and if you put some good filters on there, it's going to look fantastic. I mean, you really have all the tools you need. Do not get hooked up with that sort of that, you know, a lot of people get hung up with that concept of like, oh man, I got to shoot this on a Red Epic. It's not going to look right unless I have a Red Epic. It's like, no, if your content is interesting, fun, and engaging, you could shoot it on the lowest common denominator, and people will still enjoy it. So
that is, there's something to one of the first things that I ever did was with this company. It was a fake trailer for a movie called Wheels. And it was about a guy that falls in love with a girl in a wheelchair, but everybody else in his life treats that as if it's like a problem, like as if there's something like wrong with her that she can like, you know, fix. It was funny, trust me. And and we got calls from like HBO and people being like, where, you know, how can we see the whole movie? And we're like, we didn't make a movie. It's a, you know, it was early on, so there wasn't a lot of that stuff happening. But I think that idea of like filming a pivotal scene and like having, you know, 3 or 4 minutes of something to show is really valuable and smart.
And just to play pop psychologist as to why that works, people are more deeply engaged with content when they can use their imaginations, right? When you give them just enough where they can fill in an expectation of where this thing's going, they're going to stick around. If they see something that sort of like spells it all out in the first, you know, few minutes, you're like, I got it, okay, whatever. But if you just keep it, it's like, and that's why I think this new interesting device is working. It's like, I do want to know the whole story. Where did that thing come from? Like in one of these things, it's, I don't ruin the surprise, but there's a character that there's a really interesting turn at the end of this 7 minutes. You're like, oh my God, what is the backstory that got him from that original point to right here? And I think that's what, you know, grips people's imaginations. And I think that's something you can use to your advantage quite successfully.
Well, that is storytelling. That's what this panel is, and that is the best part of storytelling for certainly in the visual media. But, you know, they have to come back again, you know, leave them wanting to come back for more.
A lot of the audience questions have to do with cost or getting together and working with people. I feel like a big takeaway from this group is just not to be afraid to just ask for help without any sort of funding. If there was any other advice along that lines that you could just grab these people on the shoulders and shake them and tell them to do, what would it be? Mike, I'd like your opinion on this.
Thank you. I mean, I think I kind of touched on it before. I would say it sounds so simple to say, but be nice. I think you're going to find when you're networking and you're working with different people, the online world, the digital media world is not as small as it used to be. But you're going to find you're going to see, you know, the same people, you know, over and over. We were talking earlier, David and I, like, we know people that I had done a Webby thing last year, and we know, you know, it's a community, and I think be careful about, you know, your reputation and working with people, because it will get back to you, and you know it will get to other people, and so I think just sort of treat everyone with respect, and you know I think you'll find that you work more, certainly, even as a result.
I think that's it for us, guys. That's a good way, unless anybody has any parting words for new creators, but
be nice.
Thank you to our panel. Yeah, be nice and ask.